Welcome, and thank you for being here. Today's story begins far earlier than most history books ever allow. Not in the age of kings or empires, but in a time so distant that it left no written words behind, only traces in stone, fire, and memory. When we talk about recorded history, we usually mean the moment humans learned to write. This happened around 5 to 5,500 years ago, in places like Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. Writing gave humanity a way to preserve names, events, and ideas across generations. It allowed stories to survive time. But here is the quiet truth. Writing arrived very late in the human journey. Long before the first symbols were carved into clay or inked onto papyrus, humans had already existed for hundreds of thousands of years. During this vast stretch of time, people lived full lives raising children, forming communities, learning from nature, and shaping the world around them. None of this was recorded in books, yet it was no less meaningful. This long era before writing is often called prehistory, but the word can be misleading. It suggests emptiness or simplicity, when in reality it was a period of deep learning and transformation. Humans were not waiting for history to begin. They were building the foundations that made history possible. Every tool shaped by hand, every fire kept alive through the night, and every story passed from one voice to another was part of a shared human journey. Recorded history may show us the final chapters, but the story itself began long before anyone thought to write it down. And it is within that unwritten world that our story truly begins. Early humans were not simply reacting to their environment. They were actively studying it. Every landscape became a classroom. Rivers taught them where animals gathered. Seasons revealed patterns of growth, movement, and change. Over time, observation turned into understanding, and understanding turned into choice. Survival required constant experimentation. When one method failed, another was tried. Different stones were tested for sharpness. Different plants were sampled carefully. Shelters were adjusted again and again to protect against wind, cold, or heat. These were not random actions but repeated decisions shaped by memory and experience. Learning did not happen in isolation. Knowledge was shared through imitation, demonstration, and spoken stories. Skills passed from older generations to younger ones, slowly improving with each cycle. What began as simple problem-solving evolved into collective intelligence. Groups that learned faster adapted better, and adaptation meant continuity. Fire is a powerful example of this process. Controlling it required patience, cooperation, and timing. Once mastered, it changed everything. Food became easier to digest, nights became safer, and social life expanded beyond daylight. Fire was not discovered once. It was learned again and again until it became part of daily life. Adaptation also shaped social behavior. Humans learned that cooperation increased chances of success. Hunting, gathering, and caring for children became shared responsibilities. Trust and communication grew naturally from these needs, strengthening group bonds. Over thousands of years, these small experiments accumulated. Each choice left a subtle mark, guiding future decisions. What we see today as intelligence did not appear suddenly. It emerged slowly, shaped by curiosity, failure, and persistence. This long period of learning formed the invisible backbone of human progress. Without it, nothing that followed farming, cities, or written language could have existed. The earliest tools were simple, but they marked a turning point in human behavior. A sharp-edged stone could cut more efficiently than bare hands, and that small advantage mattered. Over time, humans learned that different materials produced different results. Some stones fractured cleanly, others dulled quickly. Through repeated use, preference and skill began to form. Tool-making was not a single invention but a long process of refinement. Shapes became more deliberate. Edges became sharper and more consistent. Tools were designed for specific tasks rather than general use. Cutting, scraping, digging, and hunting each required a different solution, and humans learned to recognize those needs. What makes this process remarkable is its continuity. Techniques improved across generations, meaning knowledge was preserved without writing. A skilled toolmaker was also a teacher. By watching and copying, younger members absorbed complex methods that took years to perfect. This transfer of skill created stability and progress at the same time. Tools also influenced how humans thought. Planning became essential. A stone tool had to be imagined before it existed, requiring foresight and intention. This ability to visualize outcomes before acting is a core part of human intelligence. Every crafted object reflected a decision made in advance. As tools improved, so did efficiency. Better tools meant less energy spent on survival and more time available for observation, social interaction, and creativity. This shift quietly changed daily life. Technology, even in its earliest form, reshaped how humans related to their environment. The steady evolution of tools shows that early humans were problem solvers with long-term memory and patience. Their technology may appear simple today, but it was built through careful thought and continuous improvement. These early innovations formed the practical foundation upon which all later civilizations would rise. The control of fire marked one of the most important transformations in early human history. Fire was not just a source of warmth or light. It reshaped daily routines, social structures, and even the human body over time. Learning to manage fire required observation, patience, and cooperation, making it a shared responsibility rather than an individual skill. With fire, food could be cooked. Cooking softened tough materials, reduced harmful elements, and made meals easier to digest. This allowed humans to gain more energy from the same resources, supporting longer lifespans and greater physical development. Over generations, this change quietly influenced human biology and health. Fire also extended the day. Nights were no longer defined by darkness alone. Gathered around flames, people shared food, experiences, and knowledge. These moments strengthened communication and trust. Storytelling likely became more common during these hours, helping ideas, lessons, and traditions survive across time. Protection was another critical benefit. Fire discouraged dangerous animals and provided a sense of safety. Camps became more stable, allowing groups to remain in one place longer. This stability encouraged deeper familiarity with local environments and resources, reinforcing learning and adaptation. Managing fire also required planning. Fuel had to be collected, flames had to be maintained, and risks had to be controlled. These responsibilities encouraged cooperation and foresight. Fire was not a one-time discovery. It was a skill that had to be relearned, protected, and passed on. Through fire, humans began shaping their environment rather than simply reacting to it. It represented control, not dominance, but understanding. This relationship with fire set a pattern that would repeat throughout history, humans observing nature, learning its rules, and carefully using its forces to move forward. Spoken language transformed how humans connected with one another. Before writing, before symbols, and before permanent records, communication relied on sound, gesture, and shared context. Over time, these elements evolved into structured speech, allowing ideas to travel beyond the present moment. Language made cooperation more precise. Instead of relying only on imitation, humans could explain intentions, warn of danger, and plan future actions. A hunt could be discussed before it happened. A mistake could be corrected through words rather than repetition. This reduced risk and increased efficiency, strengthening group survival. More importantly, language allowed knowledge to accumulate. Observations about animals, weather, plants, and terrain could be passed on without direct experience. A child did not need to encounter every danger personally to learn about it. Spoken memory became a living archive, carried by the community itself. Language also shaped identity. Shared words created shared meaning, and shared meaning formed culture. Names, descriptions, and simple narratives helped humans understand who they were and how they related to others. Through repeated storytelling, values and social norms began to take form. As language grew more complex, so did thought. Abstract ideas became possible. Humans could discuss things not immediately present, such as past events, future plans, or unseen forces. This ability expanded imagination and problem-solving, allowing people to think beyond the visible world. Even without writing, spoken language was structured and disciplined. Rhythm, repetition, and memory techniques helped ensure accuracy. Important information survived not because it was written down, but because it mattered enough to be remembered. Spoken language laid the groundwork for everything that followed. Writing did not create communication. It preserved it. Long before history was recorded, humans were already shaping complex worlds through words alone, binding generations together through shared understanding and collective memory. Long before writing systems existed, humans were already expressing ideas through images, objects, and symbols. Cave walls, carved stones, and carefully shaped figures reveal a deep need to represent the world beyond practical survival. These creations were not accidental marks. They were intentional expressions of thought. Art allowed humans to communicate ideas that words alone could not fully capture. Images of animals, patterns, and human forms reflected observation, memory, and imagination. Some artworks appear in places that were difficult to reach, suggesting purpose rather than decoration. Time, effort, and planning were invested, which indicates that these expressions held importance within the group. Symbolism likely played a central role in shared belief systems. Repeated shapes, colors, or figures suggest common meanings understood by many. These symbols may have represented identity, natural forces, or social roles. Even without written explanations, their consistency points to shared understanding and tradition. Art also strengthened social bonds. Creating and observing symbolic works could bring groups together, reinforcing shared values and experiences. These moments helped define who belonged to the community and how individuals related to one another. Meaning was not stored in objects alone, but in the collective recognition of what those objects represented. Beyond communication, art offered reflection. It allowed humans to process experiences, observe patterns in nature, and explore ideas about life that had no immediate solution. Through symbolism, humans could engage with questions larger than daily needs, using creativity as a tool for understanding. This early artistic behavior shows that prehistoric humans were not only thinkers but interpreters of their world. They sought meaning, connection, and continuity. Long before history was written, humans were already telling stories using stone, pigment, and form to preserve ideas that mattered deeply, even without words to explain them. The way early humans treated their dead offers rare insight into how they understood life itself. Burial sites found across different regions and time periods show patterns that go beyond practicality. Bodies were often placed carefully, sometimes accompanied by objects, suggesting intention rather than disposal. These practices indicate that death was not seen as an end without meaning. Positioning of bodies, repeated burial locations, and the inclusion of tools or ornaments imply respect and awareness. Such actions required time and effort, especially for communities focused on survival, which makes their consistency significant. Burial rituals also point to early belief systems. While we cannot know the exact thoughts behind them, the repeated care given to the dead suggests concepts of identity that extended beyond physical presence. Individuals were remembered, recognized, and treated as part of the group even after life had ended. These practices likely strengthened social bonds among the living. Shared rituals created moments of reflection and unity, helping groups process loss together. In doing so, they reinforced collective memory and continuity across generations. Remembering the dead became a way of preserving group identity. Objects placed in graves were often familiar items rather than valuables alone. This suggests symbolic meaning rather than material value. Tools, pigments, or personal ornaments may have represented roles, skills, or connections held during life. Meaning was carried through association, not written explanation. The emergence of burial customs reflects emotional depth and abstract thought. Humans were not only aware of death but actively responding to it with structure and care. This behavior shows an early attempt to understand existence itself. Through these quiet rituals, prehistoric humans expressed values that still exist today: respect, remembrance, and connection. Long before written belief systems appeared, humans were already exploring questions about life, loss, and what it means to belong to a shared human story. The transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture was not a sudden breakthrough but a slow and careful adjustment. For thousands of years, humans observed plant cycles, animal behavior, and seasonal patterns. Certain locations were returned to repeatedly, not by chance, but because they offered reliable resources. Over time, people began to influence these environments. Seeds from preferred plants were scattered near living areas. Animals that were easier to manage were kept close. These small actions were not part of a grand plan, yet they marked the beginning of a new relationship with nature, one based on guidance rather than movement. Early agriculture involved risk. Depending on crops meant waiting, planning, and accepting uncertainty. Weather changes, soil quality, and timing all mattered. When harvests failed, consequences were serious. This forced communities to develop patience, foresight, and shared responsibility. Food production became a collective effort rather than an individual task. As farming practices improved, food supplies became more predictable. Surplus allowed groups to remain in one place longer, reducing the need for constant migration. Settlements grew gradually, shaped by routines tied to land and seasons. Time itself began to feel different, measured by cycles rather than journeys. Agriculture also changed social structures. Roles became more defined. Some focused on planting, others on storage, construction, or tool-making. This specialization increased efficiency but also required coordination and trust. Shared rules and customs emerged to manage resources fairly. This shift did not replace earlier knowledge. It built upon it. Skills learned through hunting, gathering, and observation remained essential. Farming succeeded because humans already understood ecosystems deeply. The move toward agriculture reshaped human life quietly but permanently. It altered how people related to land, time, and one another. From these early fields and experiments grew the foundations of settled societies, setting the stage for villages, cities, and eventually recorded history itself. As agriculture developed, humans began forming long-term relationships with certain plants and animals. Domestication was not about control, but familiarity. Over generations, people noticed which species adapted well to human presence and which traits were most useful. These observations guided careful selection rather than force. Animals that were calmer or easier to manage were kept nearby. Plants that produced reliable harvests were favored and replanted. Slowly, both humans and their surroundings changed together. This process required patience, memory, and consistency, qualities already refined through earlier ways of life. With domesticated resources, communities gained greater stability. Food supplies became more dependable, allowing people to plan further ahead. Storage methods improved, protecting surplus for difficult seasons. This reduced constant movement and made long-term settlement possible. Stable food sources also reshaped daily life. Children could be raised in one place, elders could contribute knowledge without traveling, and skills could be developed over time. Community bonds grew stronger as shared spaces became familiar rather than temporary. Domestication influenced social organization as well. Responsibilities were divided. Some cared for animals, others tended crops, built shelters, or maintained tools. This division of labor encouraged cooperation and mutual reliance. Trust became essential for the system to function. Living closely with animals also deepened understanding of behavior, health, and cycles of life. These observations improved care techniques and strengthened the connection between humans and their environment. Nature was no longer just something to follow, but something to understand deeply. The rise of stable communities did not erase earlier traditions. Hunting, gathering, and seasonal movement still existed alongside farming. However, the balance shifted. Permanence became possible. Through domestication, humans created environments that supported growth, continuity, and shared memory. These early communities formed the social framework from which more complex societies would later emerge, long before writing was needed to record their existence. Long before writing systems appeared, humans were already living in large, organized settlements. These communities were not random collections of shelters, but carefully structured spaces shaped by shared rules, customs, and cooperation. Order existed without written laws, maintained through tradition and collective understanding. Homes were built close together, indicating long-term planning and social stability. Pathways, shared areas, and communal structures suggest coordination across many individuals. This level of organization required leadership, trust, and agreed behavior, even if it was never written down. Construction itself demanded cooperation. Gathering materials, shaping them, and assembling durable structures took time and coordination. These efforts reflect planning across seasons rather than days. People were thinking beyond immediate needs, investing in futures they expected to share. These settlements also served as centers of culture. Daily routines, craft production, and shared practices strengthened identity. Knowledge was exchanged constantly through observation and spoken instruction. Skills improved not because they were recorded, but because they were practiced together over long periods. Trade likely connected these communities to distant regions. Objects made from unfamiliar materials suggest exchange networks and social relationships beyond local boundaries. These connections expanded awareness of the wider world and encouraged further innovation. Living closely together also required conflict management. Social balance depended on shared expectations and mutual responsibility. Customs, rituals, and roles helped maintain harmony and continuity. Social order was learned, not enforced through writing. The existence of organized settlements challenges the idea that writing created civilization. In reality, civilization emerged first, shaped by cooperation, memory, and tradition. Writing came later as a tool to preserve what already existed. These early settlements demonstrate that complex societies can thrive without written records. They reveal a deep human ability to organize, adapt, and live collectively, forming the groundwork for cities, governance, and history itself. One of the most remarkable achievements of early humanity was its ability to spread across the entire planet. Without maps, written directions, or modern tools, humans traveled vast distances, gradually adapting to environments that differed dramatically from their places of origin. These movements were not reckless journeys but careful expansions guided by experience and observation. Humans followed animal paths, seasonal patterns, and natural landmarks. Each new environment required learning new climates, unfamiliar animals, and different plant life demanded flexible thinking and problem-solving. In cold regions, people developed clothing, shelters, and routines that protected against harsh conditions. In hot or dry areas, they learned to manage water carefully and adjust daily activity to the environment. Coastal communities relied on the sea, while inland groups adapted to forests, plains, or mountains. Every region shaped human behavior differently. Migration also encouraged innovation. Tools, diets, and social structures changed depending on local conditions. What worked in one place was adjusted or replaced in another. This adaptability became one of humanity's greatest strengths, allowing survival across diverse landscapes. As groups moved, they carried knowledge with them. Skills learned in one region were modified and reused elsewhere. Over time, this created a wide range of cultural expressions rooted in shared human origins but shaped by local experience. Despite geographical separation, common patterns remained. Cooperation, communication, and learning were universal. These shared traits allowed humans to succeed wherever they settled. Global migration shows that early humans were explorers by necessity and by nature. Their success was not based on domination of environments, but understanding them. By adapting rather than resisting, humans established a presence across the world, long before any record existed to describe these journeys in written form. What we call prehistory often feels empty simply because it left no written records behind. Without texts, dates, or named individuals, this vast period can appear distant and unclear. Yet absence of writing does not mean absence of complexity, intelligence, or meaning. For tens of thousands of years, humans lived within systems built on memory, tradition, and shared experience. Knowledge was preserved through repetition, storytelling, and daily practice. Skills survived because they were useful, and ideas endured because they mattered. This form of continuity was active, not fragile. Writing eventually allowed information to be stored outside the human mind, but before that, memory itself was the archive. Communities relied on accuracy, attention, and responsibility to pass knowledge forward. This demanded discipline and awareness, shaping how people listened, learned, and taught. Prehistory also reflects balance. Humans adapted to their environments without overwhelming them. Change occurred gradually, guided by observation rather than force. This long relationship with nature produced deep understanding that later societies often took for granted. The foundations of civilization, language, cooperation, belief, technology, and social structure were all formed before the first written word. Writing did not create these systems. It recorded them. By the time history began, humanity had already mastered the essentials of living together. Seeing prehistory as empty limits our understanding of ourselves. It was not a waiting period, but a formative era that shaped everything that followed. The story of humanity did not begin with ink and stone tablets. It began with learning, memory, and shared experience, quietly unfolding long before anyone thought to write it down. As we reach the end of this journey, it becomes clear that recorded history is only a small window into the human story. Long before names were written down or events were dated, humanity was already thinking, learning, adapting, and building meaning into everyday life. These early chapters may be unwritten, but they are not empty. They are the reason everything that followed was possible. Understanding this longer timeline invites us to see humanity differently, not as a sudden product of civilization, but as the result of countless quiet decisions made over immense stretches of time. The past before history was not waiting to begin. It was already alive, already complex, and already shaping who we are today. Thank you for spending this time exploring the deeper roots of the human story. If you found this reflection meaningful, take a moment to pause with it and carry the perspective forward. Until next time, take care, and I will see you in the next story.